Usually when you go through a conversion, you go by yourself and you convert into a community. So you get to become a part of that community. Over here, the community converted and they have someone from the outside that comes and tries to help them. This is beautiful.
Seated at Putti. Putti is a few kilometers from Bali. And this is where we have Putti Jewish community. And in front of me, I'm seated with a Rabbi. He's going to introduce himself.
Hello everyone, my name is Rabbi Netanel Kaszovitz. I'm the Rabbi of Kenya and the East African Jewish communities. I am currently living in Kenya with my wife and 2 daughters, and we have come to work with the community in Kenya, and we're fortunate enough to have been offered the position to work with the rest of the communities around East Africa. So I grew up in Israel my entire life. We moved from America when I was very, very young, so I lived in Israel my entire life, and I studied religious studies as part of just my upbringing. The regular schools that I went to were religious. The yeshiva that I went to before the army is religious studies. Did the army, and when I finished, got married and started to study psychology and education, and had an opportunity of continuing my religious studies through a rabbinic program, through a organization called Or Torah Stone, based in this program was based in Migdal Oz in Gush Etzion. So I was fortunate enough to sit and learn there as part of a program that prepares rabbis to be rabbis abroad. And we were offered the position to come out here to Kenya and to East Africa. And the last rabbi that was here full-time for more than a few months to maximum a year left in the year 87. So there was a lot of exciting work to be done over here, and working with the communities, helping them connect more to their roots, to their Judaism. Once a few organizations heard that there was a rabbi coming out to East Africa, they got very excited because Africa is filled with Jewish communities, either historical or emerging Jewish communities. So you have communities that have been here forever, and you have communities that are predominantly white, and you have communities that are more local. So you have communities like the one in Kenya, which is mostly an expat community that starts in 1902 with the colonization and Jews escaping World War I, World War II, and seeking refugee, then Jews coming for work and working in agriculture from Europe. And in addition to that, you have communities like the community in Ethiopia that the majority of them moved to Israel, and I'm not fortunate enough to work with them, but these types of communities of Jews who have been here for generations and generations that are also found in Africa. So a lot of these smaller communities, like in Uganda or Tanzania, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, they don't have resources to have a rabbi full-time. So depending on which of these communities, with some of them I work very, very closely. Some I try to help advise along with other rabbis from South Africa that deal with the communities that are a bit closer to them.
When did you come to Africa, and how many communities have you worked with?
So I have been here. We came before COVID. We came to check out the community, and we signed our contract over 5 years ago now. But we didn't, because of COVID and restrictions, we only actually came about 3 years ago. Our main communities that we work with more regularly, the community in Nairobi, community in Arusha, Tanzania, that I'll gladly expand on, very, very interesting communities, and 3 communities in Uganda that are Abba Yedaya, that went through Orthodox conversions these communities are communities that I work with quite regularly. And then I'm always been glad to advise to other communities, as to the best of my knowledge, I am the only Orthodox rabbi from South Africa until Northern Africa that's around. So I get reached out by a lot of small communities that say, we hear you're in Africa, can you help? Just correction, there are also Chabad rabbis that are out over here. I'm talking about like as a community rabbi that is not Chabad, that is a organization specifically that focuses on working with Jews. I'm working a bit in a different capacity. So we overlap a lot, but not necessarily in the same place.
How unique would you describe the African Jewish communities compared to where you've been in the US, also in Israel?
It's an interesting question, because the question is, how are you defining unique? Mm-hmm. They are special in the fact that there's very big cultural differences, and that I feel like a lot of times when visitors come out or rabbis come and they try to see these communities, they get very excited from the cultural difference and don't realize that there's a ton of similarities. There's differences that you won't be able to differentiate with the culture. So as soon as you have cultural differences of, let's say, how a family structure is. So if you're used to having a family structure that is very much based on a husband and a wife, right, and that they work together and they're committed, and that is very, very normal. You come to Africa and people have a much harder time, depends where, but with the concept of just being just the two of you and not, for example, sleeping around is not as big of a concept. It depends on where you're talking in Africa, what tribes. So that is like one example. Another big thing that you see is there's a big difference as far as development goes. So when you're learning the laws of Shabbat, for example, you have options of how to heat up your food on Shabbat, because we have technology that enables us to do this. Out over here, you don't have a place often to plug in your phone to charge it. Some places yes, some places no. But how are you going to heat up your food on Shabbat? So you go back to the time of the Mishnah or the Gemara, and you look at it and say, well, how did they keep their food warm? Or did they keep the food warm? But the other day, one of the kids from the community asked me, he says, well, why don't we eat hot food on Shabbat day? And the answer is, well, we do. Just over here, there is no way of keeping the food warm until Shabbat day. Okay, so you have these types of differences. Also, a lot of these communities are living within themselves as opposed to seeing other Jewish communities. So there isn't a lot for them to compare of what halakha is, the proper way of following the Torah. So there's a lot of challenges in that manner, but it really, really depends on the community. I would say you have to differentiate between communities that are going through a conversion, communities that have historical connections, right? You have communities like, for example, the Lemba tribe. Lemba tribe in Zimbabwe has a claim of 2,000 years being one of the lost tribes. And when you hear their stories, well, they differ from us in quite a few things. Part of the reason is being so farly remote, disconnected from the rest of the Jewish world. But in addition to that, there's so much they are exactly like us, right? You go into circumcision, Brit Milah, keeping Shabbat, keeping kosher, right? Marrying inside the community to make sure you're preserving Jewish life. Someone wants to become part of the community, they have a version of conversion, right? Like there's like a lot of these things that go in to all of these communities' lifestyles. And soon there's actually going to be a documentary coming out that has a lot of information, very, very much worthwhile listening to it and watching it in detail, called "We Were Never Lost." Hopefully, it will come out in the next year. Produced by Rudy and Rudy Rochman and his team that have been going around to all of these communities and sitting and talking and understanding their history. And when you look at a community like the Abu Yadaya in Uganda, a community that's where I'm at right now. So we're in Putti behind me, where there's the synagogue, the Jewish community of Putti, or Putiel. They are right outside of Mbale, very, very remote place in Uganda. About 100 years ago, they realized that Christianity is not the path for them and start practicing Judaism. They split throughout the years on who's going to go through which kind of conversion. There's a small group, this is the group that I am affiliated with and teach, that decided that they are going to wait until they get an Orthodox conversion. And they waited about 100 years to be able to get this kind of conversion and lead a Jewish life. And they're right here in this amazing village. You have a few hundred across Uganda that are Abu Yadaya Orthodox Jews. And for them, their entire life is learning and understanding. But only a very few of them had the privilege of leaving the area and going seeing larger Orthodox communities to get an understanding of, well, what do Jews do? Usually when you go through a conversion, you go by yourself and you convert into a community. So you get to become a part of that community. Over here, the community converted and they have someone from the outside that comes and tries to help them. This is beautiful in a sense, but it also causes confusions of how are we supposed to do things. So part of what I do over here is I come, we sit, we learn, and if we see things that need to be changed or ideas of how do you find solutions, halachic solutions for your current living situation, we do that. Then you have, like what I was talking about with the community in Lemba, that in their mind, they have been Jewish this entire time for the past 2,000 years. So they're not really looking for outside commentaries too much. It's more of, well, what have we been doing and how do we do? So this varies in the communities, and that would also vary in the uniqueness, right? You have things that are you come here, it's very African culture. But then they go through a conversion, and they say, well, now we're Jewish, right? So now you have these two different identities that you're bringing into one, and you say, well, how does this affect? And when you're asking about how unique is it the community, right? If you look at the Ashkenazic communities from Europe, or you look at the Sephardic communities from Northern Africa, or the Yemenite communities, Russian communities, it doesn't matter where you go, each community is shaped by the people around it, right? Mm. And you'll see that the halakha brings us all almost pretty much to the same exact place. Ashkenazim and Sfaradim are writing two halakha books at the same time, and they get the same answers, which means culturally we're different, religiously we're the same. So these communities here are very, very unique in the sense that they are African, and the only known African Jewish community up until now were the Ethiopian Jews. So if you look at the Ethiopian Jews, you get to look and say, wow, these are Jews that are African. How do they behave? What is their culture? Their culture has a lot of respect for elders. Their culture has a lot of community. Well, we also have a lot of community. Okay, what else? They have specific foods that we didn't have. They actually know of specific birds that are kosher that we did not know about because of location. Great, right? So that's what this melting pot of Jewishness looks like, is all these different communities are bringing the uniqueness from the countries that they came in, and all of them being Jewish. It's a very, very, very interesting thing to see.
Most of the times when I speak to some of my friends, one of the greatest things that I see they desire is to be recognized outside Africa as Jews.
Yeah. That is really, really rough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have two things over here. You have one problem, which is politics, another problem that's halakha.